So, you are playing a tabletop role-playing game. Your character is engaged in combat. They are swinging their sword and casting spells ferociously. They take a massive hit, and they fall. What happens now? From a narrative perspective, your character is dropped to the ground. They begin to tumble. They roll. Blood is pouring profusely from them. They are dying. From a mechanical standpoint, what is happening here? Now, if you're playing 5th edition, your GM will probably start to call for you to make death saving throws on your turn. Let's go ahead and just take a peek at our SRD here and read what that is. Death saving throws. Whenever you start your turn with 0 hit points, you must make a special saving throw, called a death save, to determine whether you creep closer to death or hang onto life. Unlike other saving throws, this one isn't tied to any ability score. You are in the hands of fate now, aided only by spells and features that improve your chances of succeeding on a saving throw. Roll a d20. If the roll is 10 or higher, you succeed. Otherwise, you fail. A success or failure has no effect by itself. On your 3rd success, you become stable. See below. On your 3rd failure, you die. The successes and failures don't need to be consecutive. Keep track of both until you collect 3 of a kind. The number of both is reset to 0 when you regain any number of hit points or become stable. Rolling a 1 or a 20. When you make a death saving throw, roll a 1 on the d20. It counts as 2 failures. If you roll a 20 on the d20, you regain 1 hit point. Damage at 0 hit points. If you take any damage while you have 0 hit points, you suffer a death saving throw. Failure. If the damage is from a critical hit, you suffer 2 failures instead. If the damage equals or exceeds your hit point maximum, you suffer instant death. It is important to know that while you are dying and making death saving throws, you are considered unconscious. Any attacks made against you are automatically critical hits, should they hit. So, that is what happens in 5th edition. You go unconscious, and you begin dying. The unconscious condition is not used frequently in 5th edition. Its primary purpose is to be when your character has reached 0 hit points and has fallen and is dying. This is something of a design trap, in my opinion. A trap that I fell for. In the design of my game, I decided to try and add in a dying condition. It worked for 3rd edition. Why not here? So, this is what I wrote. The dying condition represents a creature's state of critical injury, where their life is hanging on by a thread. When a creature reaches the dying condition, they are on the brink of death and require immediate attention. When a creature's hit points are reduced to or below 0, they are dying. And for most of this, it is a retread of what is in the SRD. Why do I say that this is something of a trap? For me, it's because this is rather easy. A character who is dying, depending on what is happening in the battle, can be a very dramatic sequence. When you are dying, you are rolling a d20 and figuring out what happens if you succeed or fail the check. Some DMs will keep this roll secret, so players will want to hurry forward to their fallen compatriots and try and revive them faster. Some DMs allow it open in the public so that everyone knows and can kind of work around based on how their characters perceive the fate of their comrade, whether the blood is flowing faster this turn or next. But for the player who is dying, what is happening? A death save is made at the end of a turn. A character who is unconscious and dying rolls a d20 on their turn. On a 10 or higher, they get a success. They mark a circle on their sheet. On a 9 or lower, they mark 1 in the failures column. Sometimes more if they roll a critical failure. Nonetheless, whether they roll a 20, a 1, or anything in between, their turn is dictated entirely by one die roll. I've seen tips and tricks for how to make this more interesting, to make this more engaging. You can see a bright light at the end of the tunnel. Your life is flashing before your eyes. That sort of thing. Narrative flourish, so that the player who has waited 20 minutes for their turn can roll a die and feel like they have a part in the story as it is going forward before one of their teammates comes and brings them back to their feet. As someone who has had characters dying and die, there is a part of me that loves that sort of dramatic tension, but at the same time, I want to know the result. When a character is dying, that you are in eager anticipation of whether or not the next time you roll dice it will be 46, drop the lowest 6 times, or if you're going to be rolling an attack roll against an enemy who is in terrible shape, or one who has already fell you once before. The resolution of the dying condition, the resolution of death saves, is dramatic. The process of getting there is not. So, how can we do this better? That's a little bit of an open question. If you're a game designer, how do you handle death? How do you handle dying? How does a character die in your game? I don't know. I don't like the dying condition. I find it rather boring. I don't like the way dying works in 5th edition because it is a series of, at the very least, 3 rolls, unless you're lucky, that will get you to one point or another. Players on the outside can affect fate, but sometimes that is impossible. So, this is my solution. If you follow my second channel, which it's a bit of a chaos show there, I intersperse live streams. Okay, live streams is the wrong word for it, but recordings of actual play, of campaigns that I am in, that I am running, with games. I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 recently, but for all intents and purposes, that is digital D&D 5e. All of the pros and cons therein. But one of my favorite games that I've been playing since late 2014, Marvel Contest of Champions, this free-to-play yet pay-to-win mobile game. It is an action arcade brawling kind of game that has remarkably good game design. I've applied to be on their team before. I never got an email back. But so around the time that Infinity War is released, Kabam releases some of Thanos' Blackguard as playable characters. The first 2 that came in were Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight. Both of these characters have uses within the game, but one of them took the game's meta by storm and was a groundbreaking character for years to come, and that is Corvus Glaive. If you look at his stats, he's rather average. If you look at his abilities, there's some nice circumstantial stuff in there, but the only real thing that he has that is a huge standout is the fact that he has what are known as glaive charges. These charges allow Corvus to have guaranteed critical hits for the first 20 hits of a fight. If you can finish a fight within 20 hits, he can knock down anyone incredibly quickly. However, there's a little bit more to it than that. By pulling Corvus Glaive multiple times, you get a new ability. Glaive of Immortality. And this is where Corvus becomes incredibly interesting and relevant to our discussion on how player character death can be dramatic. And how I actually plan to implement death and dying in my next iteration of the game. So, this is the Glaive of Immortality. As long as Corvus Glaive has glaive charges, he cannot die. Instead of dying, 4 glaive charges are removed. If Corvus performs a well-timed block against that attack, only 2 are removed instead. Oh, okay, so we have a little bit of an immortality mechanic. They introduce a couple of that later on with different characters. There's some sort of cosmic thing where a lot of these godlike entities have resistance to dying and take no damage at different points. But Corvus here is different. He's an offensive-focused character who has a limited resource that turns him into a glass cannon. If you mess up your rotation, you begin losing combat potential to stave off death. You know what that is? That's dramatic. But there's also another word for it. It is, by all technical definitions, a death spiral. A death spiral, per the highest upvoted answer on Stack Overflow for this 13-year-old question, a death spiral is something that can happen in games where your combat skill is affected by your health or similar attribute. If you take a hit, your combat skill decreases slightly, making it harder for you to hit the opponent and/or easier for the opponent to hit you. While there is a certain realism to this, it can often quickly lead to the death spiral, where each hit makes it increasingly unlikely for the loser to come back, as they are getting consistently worse at attacking and/or defending. This is what makes Corvus Glaive a fun character to play. Sure, if you are playing well, you can blitz through content incredibly quickly. But if you make a mistake and you are reduced to low hit points, whenever you take damage, you are losing your potential to have 20 hits. Maybe that gets down to 16, 12. Can you defeat a character in 12 hits before your major source of damage is completely depleted? That's a lot of things, but one of them is dramatic. So, does 5th edition and 5th edition sort of games have a death spiral mechanic? Yeah, we do. It's called exhaustion. There are 6 levels to exhaustion, each one increasingly worse. Hit point maximums get halved, your speed gets reduced, you have disadvantage on different checks and then attack rolls and saving throws. And your 6th level, which really isn't a level, you die. Outright. So, if going unconscious is not fun, if rolling death saves, it's not great. What about once you hit 0 hit points, you start taking no damage. But anytime you would take damage, you instead gain 1 level of exhaustion. That's interesting. You're not going down, but you have 6 hits, and on the 6th hit, you fall. Your sword slips from your grasp as your wounds take you. It allows you to have a fighting chance for a couple of rounds. You begin to be slowed down. You begin to die. But your fight isn't over yet. Yeah. Sounds cool, doesn't it? Maybe characters who have abilities that help keep them resistant to death, or characters who are on adrenaline, because that's another mechanic we have. What if that serves as a buffer before you start taking exhaustion levels? You lose adrenaline, you lose your rage, you begin spending charges keeping yourself from entering this death spiral. You get extra glaive charges, a little bit of an extended net, a safety net, damage potential. You have extra time on the battlefield. Time when you are doing attacks, when you are thinking strategically, when you are moving units, when you are not lying on the ground unconscious as enemies begin assailing your corpse. And you fall. And then you roll 1d20 and just wait for your chance to roll more. I don't know, just something I thought was interesting, and I wonder if that sparked ideas in you for game design. If you have different ideas for death and dying in your games, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'd love to see them. I just think that we need something that is better, something that is more robust, something that is more cinematic, something that is more dramatic than I roll 1d20. Okay. Right now we're in the good. Let's see what happens next turn. Because you have a 55% chance at success. You have a 5% chance to regain 1 hit point and go down again the next turn. You have a 5% chance that next turn is your last. It's not narratively satisfying. But I think it could be.